This week, devastating news rocks us once more. After we get back on our feet, we take a look at a rather humorous article about just how much money was spent on one of George Washington's campaigns for booze. Then we'll explore the concept of time for a Freemason and how he reconciles it with his consciousness. All this and more. Stay tuned.
Welcome back to Whence Came You, a Masonic podcast featuring research papers and discussions related to Freemasonry. Here's your host, Brother Robert Johnson.
Welcome back to the show. This is episode number 639. I want to thank everybody out there who's been supporting us since July of 2011. We can't make this podcast without you. If you're curious on how to support the WCY podcast, a trusted source of Masonic education for anyone interested in the royal art, head on over to our website at wcypodcast.com, click on support the show, and see what various options might work for you. So thanks to our contributors, our fellows, producers, and of course, our legacy partners. There are a number of other ways you can help support the show, whether that's through Skull and Crown Ltd, or getting a tarot reading, or just making a one-time donation. All of those things, including bookstore links back to Amazon, and all of those things go right back into the production of this show, and we greatly thank you for that. If you don't want to do any of that, consider just sharing a link on social media somewhere, and that works too. In the news, I wanted to let everybody know a pin update. We've been contacted by the manufacturer, and those pins are well underway. I should be getting them soon, and once I do, you all who I owe pins to will be the first to get the brand new WCY Producer's Lapel Pin in an all-new design. Now, the big news for the week. This is a difficult one to talk about, but last week we got word, and we waited because we wanted to make sure that the appropriate parties were sharing this sad news first. And the folks who broke the news, of course, is none other than the Meet, Act, and Part podcast. I will just read their post and then offer a brief commentary, and that is that we are deeply saddened at the passing of our beloved co-host, Bill Hosler. Bill was one of the bright lights in Freemasonry, and his insights on the craft will be deeply missed by all of us. Words cannot adequately express the impact that Bill had on so many of us. He literally had thousands of friends both virtually and in person. All of us send our sincerest sympathies to his fiancée Tammy and his entire family. Services for Bill are being planned at this time, and they will share the information when they are finalized. We will also share more thoughts and memories of our departed brother in the near future, but wanted to inform all of the Meet, Act, and Part listeners of the sad news of this devastating loss that we've all suffered. So since I was able to share that information this morning, or this afternoon rather, it's already gone, all over the web. It's made a huge impact in almost every Masonic circle. Bill has been known for all of his Masonic service, as well as the book he wrote, Meditations of Flawed Ashlar, as well as all of his Midnight Freemasons posts about the 50-year Mason and some others. He was even an integral part of the Masonic Radio Theater podcast. Bill was a tremendous asset to the fraternity, but also to, I would say, a lot of the younger Masons at the time, because he constantly bridged the gap for us as somewhat newcomers into the fraternity and the old school that had been running the show. Bill was a great advocate for us, and he will be sorely missed. Brother Bill, it was an absolute pleasure and an honor to know you, to work with you, and to be your brother. And I think I speak for everyone when I say, we will miss you. And until we meet again, brother. With that, Bill would want the show to go on, and he probably would have told us to not make a fuss about it, but, we had to say something and show some respect, if only even to let his fans know, his friends know of this passing. I ran across an interesting historical article recently, and it's all about our first president and brother George Washington. The article caught my eye because it was called George Washington Spent an Entire Campaign Budget on Booze. I thought this was kind of funny. Nonetheless, I wanted to read it for you all. And it says, before he was the first president of the United States, George Washington was a member of the Virginia House of Burgesses from 1758 until 1775. He actually lost his first election, however, and attributed his defeat to his failure to provide enough alcohol for the voters, according to author Daniel Okrent. At the time, it was common for candidates to woo voters by plying them with food and liquor. Washington avoided the same mistake during his second run, spending nearly the entire campaign budget on 28 gallons of rum, 50 gallons of rum punch, 34 gallons of wine, 46 gallons of beer, and 2 gallons of cider royal, served to 391 voters, nearly a half of gallon per voter. He also spent 3 pounds on dinner for friends, which very likely also included booze. His campaign even rolled barrels of liquor to polling places on Election Day, a custom in Virginia at the time. The practice of winning over voters with booze was widespread despite being technically illegal and was known as swilling the planters with bumbo. Washington didn't need to woo anyone in order to become president. Quite the opposite, in fact, as he did no campaigning, and he had to be convinced to even accept the role, despite being unanimously elected. He also planned to retire after his first term, but was persuaded to remain in the office, running unopposed in the 1792 election and once again winning unanimously. Politicians today could only dream of such popularity. A section of the article then lists by the numbers. It says number of biological children George Washington had, 0. Books in George Washington's home library, 1,200. Total beer sales in the U.S., 2022, 115 billion. Funds spent on the 2022 midterm elections, 8.9 billion. So I think by the numbers you can kind of see that booze, just beer sales alone, are over 10 times more important than campaign election funding. Then it has some interesting did-you-knows, of course. George Washington's teeth weren't made of wood. You probably already knew that Washington had dentures, but you might not know what partially necessitated them in the first place. Walnut shells. The founding father badly damaged his original set of chompers by using them to crack walnut shells. And he was only 24 years old the first time he had a tooth pulled. He suffered from various dental maladies for the rest of his life and rarely smiled because he was self-conscious about his teeth. But not because they were made of wood, which they were not. Washington's dentures were mostly made from human teeth, including those of his enslaved workers, as well as ivory, cow teeth, and various alloys made of lead, tin, copper, and silver. By the time he was inaugurated at the age of 57, he was down to his last natural tooth. Just some fun information about every Grand Lodge's favorite brother, Brother George Washington. Next, I'd like to read a piece that came from thesquaremagazine.com. I will provide links back to the original article, as well as any of the other items that I'll be reading this week. There is something here that we should talk about, and that is time and how we use it. So, the Mason and his consciousness of time. Again, published on thesquaremagazine.com. Time is the measure of all things. Nobody can buy life. Life is spent, and the expense of life is time. As time goes by, life is spent. To spend your life well, you must spend your time well, and spending your time well means making a good investment of it. If time is well spent, life will be well spent. As Dante Alighieri says, quote, "He who knows the most is the one who most grieves over the loss of time," end quote. Spending life well means giving time a content. Then time is well spent when time lived is given content. To the extent that time is given content, a meaning is given to life, to existence. The meaning of life will be the content that is given to time. The higher the level of consciousness of a person, the more productive and valuable will be the content that he will give to his time, thus rising towards the sublime and away from the vulgar. So how do you give time content to give life a sublime meaning? Such a question has an answer: in the search for knowledge. It is in the search for knowledge that the truths are found, those individual and particular truths that the Mason builds every day. His truths, and not that absolute truth by means of which dogma has indoctrinated humanity, worshipping ignorance, since to think that you have the absolute truth would be to live in the most total and absolute ignorance, thus losing the path of reason. There are truths, those truths that are built every day through experience. The Mason is the fruit of his truths, and not of the truth. Therefore, it is in the search for knowledge that the truths that can give content to time and meaning to life are built. Time. Etymologically, the word time comes from the Latin tempus, understood as the duration of the things that are subject to change. Time in Greek mythology, for example, is symbolically represented by three gods: Kronos, Aeon, and Kairos. Kronos, or Saturn for the Romans, is the god of linear and irreversible time that devours everything. It is the chronological time that inevitably passes, leading us toward the future and closer to death. He is the god of death. Aeon is the god of circular time, a serpent that bites its own tail, is not born, always exists, and does not eat anything. It is the time of life. He is the god of life. Between time of life, Aeon, and the time of death, Kronos, there is a god of intermediate time called Kairos, god of human time. Kairos means right or opportune moment. Kronos, Aeon, and Kairos are represented in the god Janus, lord of triple time, the past, which is no longer, the future, which is not yet, and the present, unavailable moment of space-time that is eternal. The human being lives in the intermediate time that is his eternal present in constant change. It is in the intervening time that the Mason formulates the triple question: what are we? Where we come from? Where are we going? Everything that exists in the universe is conditioned by change, which is the most general form of being for all objects and phenomena. Change is a universal constant. It is movement and interaction. The only constant and permanent thing in life is change, as Heraclitus said, quote-unquote, "There is nothing permanent except change." Time is change. Man lacks all power over time because he cannot go back, stop, or maintain an instant or advance time. Man can only, in a relative way, manage time, and depending on how he manages and invests time, the conditions under which he must live, change will depend, which constitutes an authentic experience of time itself. Man occupies a place in space, space in which is his time, his reality, and the conditions of circumstances of his existence. There is only a mobile and very ephemeral present that inexorably changes toward the future. So, in the wise and prudent investment of time, one of the main causes of the effects of change in life is found. Life. Life is time. It is change. Life is a rhythmic phenomenon that develops continuously through the existence of cycles or periods. For Ilya Prigogine, physicist and chemist of Russian origin, winner of the 1977 Chemistry Prize, life is time that is inscribed in matter, and irreversible phenomena are the origin of biological organization. All biological phenomena are irreversible. This irreversibility is a property common to the entire universe. We all age in the same direction because there is an arrow of time. Life is the intermediate state between birth and death, in which you struggle to maintain homeostasis in a preferential state. Well, for this struggle to sustain homeostasis, paradoxically, in the face of irreversible biological phenomena that lead to death, be a useful expenditure of energy in the universe, the human being must try to give content to this intermediate state called life. In classical Greece, for example, the Platonism, the meaning of life is found in the achievement of a superior form of knowledge, which is the idea, form of the good, from which everything good and just obtains utility and value. In contemporary philosophy, for pragmaticism, that suggests that the practical and useful understanding of life is more important than the search for an impractical abstract truth about life. The meaning of life can only be discovered through experience. In short, in the content that is given to life, there will be the meaning of life and my life. The content. It is in the mind that we give content to life, since the mind is the laboratory where the here and now are learned, unlearned, and relearned, that space-time continuum in which everything that exists and that we call the cosmos takes place. For Carl Sagan, the cosmos is all that is, all that was, and all that will be. It is in the mind that the recognition of our status as Homo sapiens in the cosmos develops. It is in the condition of Homo sapiens postulated by Edgar Morin that we give content to life, since man is a mixture, a hybrid between reason and emotion, wisdom and madness. Man is a crazy animal whose madness reason has invented. The content of life of Homo sapiens is a function of what he has called human principles and values. The so-called principles and values created by Homo sapiens are nothing other than survival strategies designed to preserve the life and continuity of the species and maintain an apparent social order at its convenience. The principles and values of Homo sapiens demands, which have been created based on their achieved truths, are the inputs by virtue of which life is given content, since it is the content of the mind that defines the content of the life. The higher truths built by virtue of the knowledge acquired by experience, the more sublime in a philosophical sense, will be the principles and values that as survival strategies will give content to life, since life must evolve and transcend. In short, the content of life is in the search for knowledge that allows for the improvement of life, the form of the life condition, to make it evolve and transcend. Here is the work, through individual and discrete work, of every Mason. Thinking. It is in the equation of time, life, and content that Homo sapiens, as a free thinker, and particularly in this condition as a Mason, learns and develops the art of living. Living as a thinker, which differentiates it from the animal, or as Stephen Hawking would say, quote, "We are just an advanced race of primates on a planet smaller than an ordinary star. But we can understand the universe. That makes us something very special." End quote. To think is to reign, Oswald Wirth will say, because the art of thinking, philosophy, allows the Mason to reign over the sense of time, to give a content and a meaning to life. If the art of living is in thinking, then life is to be measured by intensity rather than duration. In this sense, Lord Chesterfield pointed out, quote, "Each lost moment is equivalent to 100 lost qualities and advantages, while each moment, well spent, is time wisely placed at a very high interest." The Mason and His Consciousness of Time, an article inspired by the words of the President of Uruguay, Pepe Mujica, in 2014. This article was by Carlos Francisco Ortiz. Carlos was initiated in 2015 in Equality Lodge number 88. He joined Fraternal Action Lodge number 42 in 2018, under the regular Grand Lodge of Chile. During his university life and before receiving Masonic Light, he participated in the reorganization and foundation of Clans of the Youth Fraternity, Alpha Pi Epsilon. And there are a number of other articles by Carlos Francisco Ortiz, which you can read on thesquaremagazine.com. Again, I'll put links back to this article and others in the show notes, and I thank Brother Carlos for these excellent thoughts on time. You know, as I understand this, I kind of look at it as I should govern my time wisely by valuing all of the things that I could be doing with my time in terms of experience to form a more fully developed mind or consciousness of myself. There were very interesting thoughts that were exposed here, and again, thank you to Brother Carlos for these. That's it for this week. I hope you all join us next week on another edition of the Whence Can You podcast. Thanks one more time to our supporters, the contributors, fellows, producers, and legacy partners, and also anyone out there sharing the show. You guys are all awesome. If you're curious on how you can help support the show, head on over to our website, wcypodcast.com, click on Support the Show, and check out the various options. We'll be back next week. We should have an amazing interview with one of the men organizing and behind Camp Cornerstone, which again is going to be the inaugural Camp Cornerstone weekend event packed full of Masonic programming, including an outdoor degree, table lodge, and more. Hurry up and get in there and make your arrangements. You can check out flagstaff7.org for more information, or head on over to our website again, and this time click on Presentation Schedule. You can scroll down just a little bit and you'll see the 3 flyers there that can lead you right back to where you can get your tickets for this event. If you liked Camp Masonry and you've been missing it, well, this is another chance at that. You'll be out in Flagstaff, Arizona. I'll be there speaking at a festive board. It's going to be a lot of fun. And that's it. So, until next week, stay on the level. For Whence Came You, I'm Robert Johnson. Take care.
You've been listening to Whence Came You, a Masonic podcast featuring research papers and discussions related to Freemasonry with your host, Brother Robert Johnson. Be sure to join us for our next edition.
WCY Media.
This is